You are listening to a special edition of Outside the Boards podcast celebrating Oak Brook Polo Club's 100th anniversary. I'm Danny O'Leary. Founded in 1922 by legendary businessman Paul Butler, the Oak Brook Polo Club is an American polo treasure and one of the oldest polo clubs in the United States. It was once the sport's epicenter for elite professional polo and served as home to the U.S. Open Polo Championships for 24 straight seasons and other prestigious international and national polo tournaments. Paul's primary and enduring passion was horsemanship. In 1921, Paul and his father, Frank Osgood Butler, planted the first polo field and brought polo to Oak Brook. It was in 1927, standing on the international field at Meadowbrook Polo before the start of the Westchester Cup, Paul prophesied, "Someday all this will be gone and the center of polo will be Oak Brook." Paul's prophecy came true in 1953 after the Open Championship was played in Meadowbrook. The next year, the Open moved to Oak Brook where it would be played until 1979, the longest consecutive time the Open has been played at one location. By 1956, Oak Brook Polo Club had 13 polo fields and stabling for 400 horses, with games played 6 days a week. The club also included grandstands, bleachers, and box seats, a clubhouse, and 36 miles of tree-lined trails. Paul joined 4 polo fields so they could be used as east-west and north-south airstrips for family and incoming guests. Those guests included royalty, dignitaries, and celebrities from His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales, Prince Charles, to Hollywood's Audrey Hepburn and Vivian Leigh, and countless others visited the club. Paul also initiated and hosted a long list of international polo matches that drew legendary players from around the world. The Oak Brook team also traveled far and wide to support other clubs, and Oak Brook hosted international teams representing nearly 30 countries. Polo provided the village of Oak Brook a lifestyle appeal, a social sporting scene amplified and carried on by his son Michael and daughter Jory. It helped lay claim that polo created Oak Brook. The Oak Brook Polo Club was the largest polo plant in the world from 1954 to 1979 and would be billed the polo capital of the United States, or Polo Town. In 2022, the Oak Brook Polo Club will be celebrating its 100th anniversary and will returning to its original and masterpiece field, the Cecil Smith Field. To honor this historic occasion, the Oak Brook Polo Club has invited club friends and family to share stories of their fondest memories of visiting and playing at Oak Brook. Join us as we take listeners down memory lane with some of the sport's household names while they share their experiences at Oak Brook and the impact the club and its founders have played on their lives. Saddle up. Welcome to this Outside the Board special podcast edition with me, Danny O'Leary. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our 6th episode of this special edition podcast of Outside the Board celebrating Oak Brook Polo Club's 100th anniversary. Before I introduce my next guest, did you know that the Oak Brook Polo Club was the largest polo plant in the world from 1954 to 1979? It would be billed the polo capital of the United States, or Polo Town. My guest on today's podcast is Scott Devon. Scott's a lifetime polo player from Grand Rapids, Michigan, where he began his polo career at Country Polo Club, where he spent his time as a hot walker between shuckers. Scott took up the game while at Michigan State at the age of 21 and became a 4-goal player at his peak. He continues to play today in his 60s and currently plays high goal at Grand Champions Polo Club in Florida, home of the 26-goal World Polo League. Scott's connection with Oak Brook began with his father, who had the goal of playing at Oak Brook. They would visit over Labor Day to watch high goal polo and U.S. Open in the late 70s. Scott's fondest memories of polo were when he would travel with Michael and Adam Butler, representing Oak Brook Polo and the United States overseas. Scott is a very close friend to the Oak Brook Polo Club and the Butler family, and it is an honor to speak with him and hope to see him return with the team during this year's historic season. Enjoy. Scott Devon, thank you for joining me on this Oak Brook Polo Club 100th anniversary podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Dan. Nice to talk to you.
Excellent. Well, I hear that you have a lot of history with the Oak Brook Polo Club. You were recommended by Mike Daly, Joel Baker, Michael Butler, like you got to get Scott on. Bobby Putz, he's like, yeah, you definitely got to get Scott Devon on this. I'm sure you can share a lot of great stories. And that's the goal of this podcast, is just to kind of go down memory lane of our 100th anniversary. There's a lot to talk about. And we wish a lot of people were still with us. I'm sure they would be able to tell some great stories of the early days in the 50s and 60s of the club and taking over the U.S. Open Polo Championship in the mid 50s or early 50s, I think it was. So I'm excited to walk down this path with you, Scott. First of all, who are you and what is your affiliation with Oak Brook?
Scott Devon, and lifetime polo player. My father played as well, Wes, which I'm sure a lot of the people will remember. And we are from Grand Rapids, Michigan, and started with Country Polo Club. My dad played there when I was a teenager, and my first job was a hot walker. And if people don't remember it, back in the days, they used to walk the horses after each chukker, which I think I was 12 when I started. A sweaty horse with stepping on your feet wasn't exactly my favorite thing to do in the summer. And so my first love wasn't horses, but I came to love horses and the sport. And I was active in other athletics in high school and took the game up when I was in college. And I'm still playing in my 60th year on this planet. And after a 7-year hiatus, so I've just purchased 9 horses this summer and playing in the Grand Champions Polo Club with the 16 goal and the 26 goal this winter.
Oh, wonderful, man.
Yeah.
I hope to get Mark and Melissa on my other podcast.
Yeah, that'd be great. I just had dinner with Mark last night, and we're all looking forward to the season and have a great friendship. And Mark's actually the one that got me back into polo in the spring, and I've been riding his horses this summer and got my own and looking forward to, I call it my last rodeo.
There you go.
Hopefully it's a long one.
I love it. I love it. How old are you today, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 60 now.
60. There's no age barriers in this sport.
No, and Stuart Armstrong, is a little bit older than me and playing at 3 goals. So I was 4 goals at my peak, and now I'm rated 1. So I hope to hopefully play that and more this winter. You might have to work at it a little harder. I'm riding every day and doing Pilates and things I never used to do, but hopefully my back can withstand the season. But it sure is a joy to play again.
My boss, Jim Jury, has a great line, and that is, you don't play polo to get fit. You have to be fit to play polo.
Yeah,
And
that's
I
very
find
true.
that to be incredibly true because you could be the best football player or hockey player around, and the moment you got it on horseback, you realize you have muscles that you never even knew you had.
Oh, I know. Firsthand, this spring when I played, Mark called me, Gansey called me and said, come on down for a weekend. We'll just stick and ball. And I said, well, that sounds like fun. So I got down there and I stick a ball, and it was like a Tuesday. I said, we have a practice on Thursday. By Wednesday, even stick and ball, and I was completely sore. Then we had a practice on Thursday. I could barely get through 3 chukkers. And then all of a sudden we have a game on Sunday. And I'm like, I didn't expect this at all. But I was so sore. And I think it took 2 weeks to finally recover. But I played awful. And fortunately, I had Nick Roldan on my team, and we won the tournament, and it was a lot of fun. So I got hooked again.
But it's a good sore.
It's a good sore.
You haven't done this in a while. Your body's telling you, but I'm glad you're doing it.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
So, how old were you when you first started playing?
I was 21 when I first started, and I went to Michigan State at the time and came back to Grand Rapids to play. The club was Country Polo Club. My dad hired Kelly Garcia Velez, who was a still really good friend of mine. I actually saw him yesterday at the gym working out. We were together, but he was, I think, 19 or something at the time that he played with my dad. And they played in the 8 hole, and it was a Midwest circuit. It was teams from Detroit, Grand Rapids, Cleveland, and Toronto, I believe, at the time. And then every year over Labor Day, we'd go to Oak Brook and stay at the Drake Hotel across the street and watch the high goal. And that was even back when they had the US Open in the late 70s, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So it was big aspiration for us country folk in Grand Rapids to come to Chicago and see real polo. And it was funny because back in the day in Grand Rapids, the guys wore whatever number they felt was their favorite. So you'd had like 12 to 99s on the shirts, not 1 through 4. So that tells you how long ago that was, and how much polo has changed even in Grand Rapids since then. But it was very aspirational to come to Chicago and see the US Open. We'd come back, and I think we were a goal better, probably -2 to -1s after watching great polo there.
So, like, after having conversations with like Ronnie Tong and what have you, their introduction to Oak Brook, started out as kind of a spectator, whereas their father may have played sort of thing, but that was kind of their entrant point. And then ultimately they either came here and started to groom during their summers when they're in college and hot walking, and ultimately they've been asked to jump on someone's team. Is that kind of the path you kind of had?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. My dad, of course, loved polo, and he came to Oak Brook first, and his goal was to play at Oak Brook. And he did the same thing in Palm Beach a few years later, because a lot of the guys, obviously Bill Soccer and A lot of Chicago players, the Coons and whatnot, went to play in Florida. So it enabled us to go from A to Z pretty much in polo in a few years because we'd summer in Chicago and then play in Palm Beach and the medium goal in the winter. So that connection was pretty strong. We were one of the first families or players down here in the early 80s in Palm Beach. So I've been able to see the area grow up from a 2-lane dirt road to Palm Beach to now it's a sprawling megatropolis, all because of Bill Lovasacker's vision.
And who also got a start up here as well.
Yep, for sure.
I love that Chicago connection right there.
Yep.
Where would have Wellington been in terms of the polo capital it is today without him and his experience working with Paul in Chicago?
Yeah, we actually bought our first condos here from the Crammell brothers, one of the Crammell brothers.
Uh-huh.
That's a long connection for sure.
My gosh. So your father played, he wanted to play here, he was playing. Who are some of the players and teams that you were kind of colleagues of yours, teammates while you're up here?
It really formed not only myself as far as my polo life, but culturally as well. The people that I met coming from a small town in Grand Rapids to international acquaintances that Michael had, and was also able to travel with Michael and Adam. And we played in the international teams, which I'm sure a lot of people have touched on, which were really life changing for me, to go to England and play against Prince Charles and Prince Harry and Prince William, who played against them all and with them over the years. And then also to Ireland, I went with Michael and Adam. We went to Italy played with Dante Fava against Dante Fava's team. And then, of course, the reciprocal aspect of where they'd come back to Chicago and Oak Brook and play. I felt like I was on the Olympic team, and of course, traveling with Michael was another experience, which was wonderful. And really get to know Adam. We were in each other's weddings and still in contact and friends, and our wives are close and, know his son and still keep in contact with Michael. So it's been a lifelong, for me, 40 years of just an incredible life-changing aspect, all due to Oak Brook Polo.
I love the international piece that you mentioned, Michael taking you to Italy, England, and Ireland and all across the globe. At that time, was there really another USA club or team that was making those international relationships and playing out there? Or was Oak Brook pretty much steering it?
I think it was Oak Brook, from what I've known. And since then, of course, played a lot in Palm Beach, and what was cool too was the amount of spectators that it would draw. And then I do believe, I remember in Palm Beach Polo here back in the day, they brought Prince Charles here and Lady Di was at the event. And I've never seen anything like it. It was like at halftime, it's like 10,000 people, maximum participants watching, spectators. And the whole sea of people came across the field to get a closer look at her at halftime. And she was about 20 yards from me to my left. And it was just like, I got goosebumps just even talking about it now. What a special magnet she was to people. And a lot of those international events were the same. I mean, it was more than polo. It was, bonding and talking about life and horses and culture with people that I'd never have access to. And I guess it goes back to that famous quote of polo being your international passport. I think Winston Churchill or someone said that. And I lived it, and I lived it because of Michael and his vision and Oak Brook Polo and Paul Butler and all that history. I can honestly say was the most impactful part of my life due to that. So I really relish it.
What tournaments did you play in Oak Brook?
We played everything for, I think we were there about 10 years. I think it was like the mid 80s to the mid 1990s, but was fortunate to win everything at one point. Bobby Putz was one of our first pros over there. And it was funny because we won the Jaipur Trophy, which was only an 8-goal tournament, but they had these cool trophies that were horses. I believe the Maharashi of Jaipur donated these trophies. So we would actually go through a wall. It was Bobby and his brother, and I think Billy Mudra too. And we won the tournament, but it was like the most important, even though it was 8-goal, because it was such a cool trophy. And I still have it. And, we're all really young, early 20s. And it was just so much fun back then. And Michael would have the black tie events and, we'd drink the champagne out of the trophies, which were massive back then, and, sneak that around. Hopefully Michael wouldn't catch us. But yeah, so Bobby was one of our first pros. He was a great guy, great to play with. Alfredo Isanina from Guatemala was a pro we had at the beginning. We played with Bill Walton from Texas. I think we swept that summer polo with Bill, and Daryl Schwetz was on that team. Played with Dale Sweats, his brother, who was very involved with Grand Champions Polo down here with commentating and managing and teaching and umpiring, all that great stuff. And we had a really fun team with Samuel Moreno from Chile, along with Augusto Gomez from Argentina. Those guys became personal friends. Actually, Augusto and his wife, Marcela, are coming to visit in February in Palm Beach here. And we're going to get together. And his son, Tattoo, is playing in South Florida as well. Of course, my dad was the captain of our team. The team was called Devonwood. After my dad passed, I formed my own team later in life called Catamount, which we played in Palm Beach and have been successful teams. Many tournaments we've won down here and had a lot of fun with playing with Carlos Gracita and Mike Azzaro, who actually has Chicago roots too, with his dad, and one of the best players ever from America. And Nick Roldan's been on my team for a long time, Todd Offen from Canada, Brandon Phillips from Canada. So there's really a deep connection to that Midwest, whether it's started from that 8-goal league that, we used to travel more than just stay in our hometowns. And we went to Toronto a lot, and they would have tons of players there. But that's the only thing I wish people traveled a little bit more. That it was really fun back in the day when we did that.
Yeah.
And I know it's hard logistically, but those were always great times. And I was also able to play with Stuart McKenzie and Charles Smith. Michael got hurt one year where he broke his leg, and I was the substitute for Michael and played with Stuart, Charles, and Adam, which was one of the amazing teams I played on. And Prince Charles came over that year, which I'm sure everybody that's in Oak Brook remembers those days that were there. And I was the substitute for that game. But of course, Michael played with a broken leg, Prince Charles. So, but that was quite a weekend. I still remember it. And they had the polo ball at the Drake Hotel, and Oprah was there with Stedman. And I remember.
Wait, Oprah was there?
Oprah was there, yep, with Stedman. And before she was really big time, she was Chicago.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I remember she was just had a magnet smile and magnetism about her. And I remember Prince Charles' speech, and he just cracked me up. I mean, he had this dry British humor, and I just started rolling. And I just, to this day, find the British humor to be brilliant. And it was so unexpected, because I thought, well, this guy, he's probably really stuffy, and very formal, and which he can be, of course, with his royal duties. But I think in that environment, he actually let his personality come through, and we all have commented on it afterwards, how funny he was. And, that was, again, a pinch me moment that.
You raise a good point in a way where polo, for some reason, is the great equalizer and people are less stuffy or something like that. Because it's an affluent sport. There's very wealthy individuals and leaders in their own industry. But I'll tell you one thing, hanging out with the guys here in Chicago, I love hanging out with them, having a Coors banquet beer, sitting around in blue jeans and laying back and watching some polo. It's not all fancy hat, seersucker, and champagne when you're in the player's corner. I always tell people that the player's corner is a much more different environment than you might think.
I tell people, which again, the image is totally opposite of what it is in reality. And, I said, it's more like hanging around with a Formula One team, or even NASCAR at one point. There's a real Western influence of polo, of course, in the US, and Argentina, is also more of a country sport there. The commonality, of course, is the horse, and that grounds us all. Hopefully not too often. I've been grounded enough and falling off, but behind the scenes, it is definitely something that is more of a grounded sport than it seems to be. And I remember playing with Prince Harry in England, for instance, and we're at halftime. I was with Mike Azzaro and a team, and Prince Harry just sat on the ground, and I was like, well, where's his royal entourage, And I don't know if I could say this, but, he was massively hungover, and he had an outing the night before with his military guys, and he was just funny and just down to earth and just, saying, sorry, guys, I'm not myself today. I'm a little hungover, and I was like, wow, this is funny.
It just further humanizes those guys
At
the end of the day. And I love to hear that. There are certain names that are in mainstream polo today that you would not think had some upbringing in Oak Brook. As I understand, Nick Roldan had a starting up here. Is that true?
Yeah, actually, his mom, Dee, was up probably in the early 2002, something like that. And Nick was up there. So I knew they had some background with Nick's dad, who was one of the first Argentines, too, with Fortunato Gomez to come to the U.S. So A lot of those guys were the first Argentines that came over and played the U.S. Open against obviously Tommy Wayman and some of the great American players. But it was really the start with the U.S. Open of the Argentines coming over. And it all started at Oak Brook. And, it was just amazing polo that we've never seen before.
And you said the Grasitas were up here as well.
Yeah, I played with Carlos in Florida, who turned out to be one of my best friends. We miss him today. I actually was at the hospital when he passed and his tragic fall here. But yeah, Carlos was one of the coolest guys ever and one of the greatest players ever, and just a gentleman and wonderful person that we miss today and always. I was fortunate to play with his brother Memo too, right after that, and still close with his sons. So that, leads to the polo family. I think we are family, and even though sometimes we hate each other on the field and things happen in the heat of the moment, but I look back at my 40 years of playing and I can honestly say I wish the best for everybody in the sport, and people I've met have just been wonderful experience for me. And again, it all started at least to be formed at Oak Brook.
Can you think of anyone other that's in mainstream polo today that had some stint or another here in Oak Brook? Like guys like Nick Roldan? Yeah, I know, like even going further back, like even a lot of people think that Sue Sally Hale played
Yep.
up here. She wasn't at Oak Brook, but back in the day, there was a lot of polo clubs like in the Lake Bluff area and things like that where we knew that she had played, and her and Jory Butler were incredibly influential at finally being recognized by the United States Polo Association and giving them handicaps. And we'll be celebrating that 50th anniversary this year.
Yep.
Who knew? Can you think of anyone else that our audience would be like, oh, no kidding, they were up here?
Obviously, the Kuhn family, was very instrumental. Walt Kuhn, that was with Fairlane Farms, but Dick and Johnny, and were great players back in the day. 5, maybe 6 gold players. That was the other thing too. There's a lot of good players that weren't professional,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, even the sponsors were highly rated. Like Jeffrey Kent was 4 goals, and I'm sure I'm missing a ton of people, but even the amateur level was way higher than it is today. So I'm not exactly sure why, but now even in Florida, we see a lot of patrons, barely 1 goal players, and that was never the case before. You'd see a lot of 4, 5, 6 goal amateur players, and I don't know why that is today, but the level was certainly high at Oak Brook.
The Oak Brook Polo Club is thrilled to announce the creation of the Friends of Oak Brook Polo. The club's not-for-profit arm created with the mission of supporting quality recreational and competitive polo in Oak Brook through the rejuvenation and sustainability of polo activities. This will ensure the long-term health of the polo club so that it continues to thrive and host safe and competitive polo for future generations. The goal of the organization will be to raise and invest funds for maintaining and improving Oak Brook Polo Club's fields so that it remains a healthy, safe, and competitive venue for the sport of polo and for the development of recreational polo programs to help advance the sport in the area. To learn more or to donate, please visit www.oakbrookpoloclub.com for more information, or contact us directly at info@oakbrookpoloclub.com. Thank you in advance for your support and helping to preserve the club's history and importance in the global polo community. Now, going back to your overseas, you're invited to go play Italy and England. And is there any sort of memorable international competition that you had played? When I talk with Mike Daly and those guys, I mean, there are times out in Ireland and in England
Yeah.
that has been so influential. Is there any one that stands out in particular?
They were all memorable, but Ireland was definitely interesting. What I could remember, there was a lot of drinking involved. I went with Robbie Yackley, Steve Yackley, Adam and I, and Michael went as well. That was our USA team. And they had to bring in a Martin Brown from England to even be competitive because the Irish at that point weren't very good players. But I remember even on the sidelines, the grooms would hand you their horse with a Guinness in their hand, and it was just the culture was crazy. But I remember I was single and young at the time and spending all night up and getting on a horse the next morning without sleeping. And so we won the first match, but by Sunday they got me. They said he's got the disease, so they won on Sunday because I think their strategy was to get us annihilated during the 3 days before that. But we sure had a great time, and just the stories. They were great storytellers, and the history there is long and deep, and the people were amazing, and so that was a wonderful trip. Italy was also were hosted by Dante Fava, and we were just treated like royalty there. It was one of the coolest parties. People from all over the world and famous people, and obviously you get used to that with Michael, but it was just another pinch me moment. Kid from Michigan showing up in these places and seeing people from the Middle East and royals and movie stars and things like that. And yeah, those international things, when I talk about it, I just remember them vividly, and they were 30 years ago, so that shows you what an impact they were.
Who was it? Tyrone Beresford and the Waterford from Ireland. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah,
We actually would love to bring back the Irish Cup. I know that was a
yeah.
hallmark event in Oak Brook
I thought,
season, and I'm an O'Leary, and my boss is a Drury, so we're Irish through and
yep,
through. So
yep. I've got a funny story that maybe I won't name any names, but the Irish guys came here in its historical context. They couldn't get the divorces way back then because of the Catholic Church and whatnot, and so they came here and we entertained them, which is kind of odd. Americans would take people from Ireland to Irish bars, Irish pubs in Chicago, rather than something new to Chicago. So we started there, and they kept saying, well, we want to see other things. What's like the hip clubs and da 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 da. So we ended up taking them, to clubs and everything. So, but anyway, long story short, there's one of the guys there, and he was married, and I think most of the guys were. And they're very flirtatious. I'm sure they still are, but in Ireland, it was like a national sport, but the women's wouldn't reciprocate. Well, come to find out, one of them did reciprocate in the U.S. with this Irish polo player, and he had such guilt the next morning, they had to take him to the hospital for panic attacks.
no kidding.
So we had to get a substitute for that player for the final. But I mean, a lot of fun, and just great times. And Michael was such a great host, of course. And even when we played, besides the international events, we'd all have, which was really unique, had dinner at Michael's Saturday night before Sunday polo. Again, polo is very competitive, and all of a sudden you're sitting down, playing the next day, but having dinner and sharing stories with your opponent. And I've never seen that since, obviously, in not in Palm Beach or anything else, how close everybody became, even as competitors, and meeting the pros. And, just, that was all from Michael.
Yeah. Quick question. All right, you mentioned Oprah, running into her before Oprah was Oprah.
Yep.
Who else, celebrity wise, can you remember that you crossed paths with? Like, for example, I got a great photo of Clifton Yandel next to Tommy Lee Jones, who was a polo player and had come up here in Oak Brook. Are there any ones that stand out? Because I have a very short list, and I always am uncovering other people in the Oak Brook and Michael Butler circle that were here, or ran into them at the Saddle Club like Mick Jagger. It's like, come on. Please, someone send
Yep.
me a photo of that.
We went to the Rolling Stones concert in Chicago, and we were like 10 rows center. And, those are just stuff with Michael. And we didn't get to visit Mick backstage, but, we knew they're friends. And even like going by Michael's like picture, he had the great pictures always at his house of famous people and his experience with JFK and sailing and all that kind of great stuff. But yeah, there was like Mickey Dolenz from the Monkees that played, at Oak Brook. Stephanie Powers came for a while. I know I'm missing some, but yeah, they'd bring in some Hollywood people, and again, it was just like meeting Prince Harry. They'd just like sit down and be like the coolest, normal, grounded people you'd ever meet in your life. And it was just that bond of polo.
Maybe they were shocked at how grounded polo players were. So it's like, I can be myself around these guys.
Yeah. And it made me feel comfortable too, So yeah, polo has that unifying effect. And, I think that's magical.
Man, that's great. Is there any other story that comes to mind, Scott, from your time up here that really pops that the audience would like to hear?
It's just kind of going down memory lane. And I think the thing that I pull away from it is never to take it all for granted, because it does change. And I think when I was playing at Oak Brook during those days, I thought it'd go on forever the way it was. And it obviously didn't. It's obviously on a rebound now. But those great times, they change. And polo shifts, it goes to different places in the world. But it was just special. Again, it was life-changing for me. And, I was just glad I experienced it. I've had similar talks with the Kuhn brothers over the years since we've not there. Just that even down when I started playing the high goal here in Florida, I would tell John Goodman and some of the other guys down here how great a time we had at Oak Brook, and how even after the games on Sunday, Michael would bring in a reggae band, and it became the hottest place in Chicago. You had supermodels from Chicago come down to Oak Brook and party, after polo with these great reggae bands. And it was funny because like Adam and I were single, and a lot of other pros or players at the time, so they said, "Leave your boots on." Again, it felt like you were pretty unique position that way when you were a polo player. So I guess that was where some of the bachelor days that Ab and I shared. But again, those don't change either. We've both been married. We just had our 30th anniversaries this year.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. So we have good laughs.
I will tell you that if you're a player or if you have some level of affiliation in polo, to the common folk, you're kind of the highlight of the party, if you will, because everyone is just fascinated about, you're a polo player?
Yeah.
It's like you're an enigma of some kind. I don't know. You're like a peacock or a wild animal that no one's ever seen or existed before.
Yeah, because I think the thing is the perceptions are so different, and polo is actually, as you know, very humbling. And once you get on a horse, like you said, it doesn't matter how much money's in your wallet. You can fall on your head just as quickly as anybody. And
the great equalizer.
Yeah, and it is, and just something soulful about it too, with the mystical side of the horse, and being connected to human and playing this great game, and also the danger. I've had, as everybody's had, many injuries and still keep coming back. So it's definitely a passion.
Do you feel that Oak Brook, I mean, obviously it has played an important role in the greater global polo community's history. Do you still feel it still plays a very important role to this day in some way? Because a lot of people tell me, even non-polo players, they'll go to another country and they'll be hanging out in India and they'll mention Oak Brook and they'll immediately know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think that obviously comes from the Butler family and what they've done to polo to expand it internationally. And as you know, at one point, the world becomes much smaller. The polo world's very connected and small at one level, and very international, bringing people from different countries and cultures. Oak Brook was really one of the visionaries to do that. So, and with now in Palm Beach being such international, and now bringing these players together, which it didn't really happen before Oak Brook. And so even though maybe the U.S. Open's not played there anymore, the roots of high goal polo and international polo really started at Oak Brook.
That's great. So great to hear that. This is our 100th anniversary, obviously, where we had this podcast for people like you to come on and share their stories and walk down memory lane. I hope to see you up here, Scott, if we can get you up here to play or put a team together and put in a tournament. We'll talk after.
Hopefully we'll be there.
Is there any parting words you want to say, or wishing Oak Brook Polo a happy birthday, happy centennial in any sort of way?
I'm really happy and pleased, and whatever the words are, that Michael's still alive to see this happen in his lifetime. And I know how much he put into polo, and obviously his father, Paul, and the whole family, to Jory, to Roydie, to Adam, to all the Butler family, really their vision and just their joie de vivre and how they approached polo in life and brought these things together, wouldn't happen without them. So I have a deep sense of gratitude towards the Butler family and what they've meant to me and my family and my life and my father. And, I'm sure with Jim Drury and a lot of the guys, Cliff Yandel, all the guys that were playing polo and still going out there, that we can continue that tradition.
That's great. Well, Scott, I really appreciate you joining me today and going down memory lane. I hope it was entertaining for you as well. Hopefully, if you have any more, by all means, share them, and maybe we'll jump on a second podcast to share the goofiness that entailed. I know, Mike Daly and Joel Baker, and I know we got to get Stuart McKenzie on so we get the whole pool house gang to share some of their stories. And my gosh, it's a hoot.
I'm also honored to be part of the Bear Club, and my nickname is Gucci Bear. So
Okay, came across my mind at the very beginning. I'm like, I got to ask Scott, is he a bear, and what is his nickname? So what is your nickname again?
It's Gucci Bear, like the Gucci brand. And
oh my God. You know what? I have a Gucci trophy That was from Oak Brook. I don't know if Gucci had one time sponsored something. I have it on I'm staring at it right now.
Yeah.
I don't know when it was, but someone was like doing an estate sale and a Gucci trophy came up from him and says Oak
Okay.
Brook Polo Club on it. I'm like, when did this occur?
Right. Yeah.
Now, how did that nickname stick?
Michael came up with it and Adam seconded it. So I had a small ritual. I don't think it's extensive as maybe Stuart McKenzie would remember, but mine was pretty PG. So you might have to ask Stuart a little bit more about those stories too. The Bears. Again, it was another big highlight that they'd consider me to be a Bear. And I think it's one of the coolest things that ever happened to me.
You know what? We got to get the Bear Club back up here, man. That would be a fantastic reunion. Maybe we do a set of Topps playing cards with everyone's image on it and what their Bear nickname was.
Yep.
But hey, Scott, thank you so much, man, for joining me and sharing, and look forward to seeing you up here this summer.
Okay, and thanks for all you do for Oak Brook Polo, buddy.
You're most welcome, and thank you.
The Oak Brook Polo Club is thrilled to announce the creation of the Friends of Oak Brook Polo. The club's non-for-profit arm created with the mission of supporting quality recreational and competitive polo in Oak Brook through the rejuvenation and sustainability of polo activities. This will ensure the long-term health of the polo club so that it continues to thrive and host safe and competitive polo for future generations. The goal of the organization will be to raise and invest funds for maintaining and improving Oak Brook Polo Club's fields so that it remains a healthy, safe, and competitive venue for the sport of polo and for the development of recreational polo programs to help advance the sport in the area. To learn more or to donate, please visit www.oakbrookpoloclub.com for more information or contact us directly at info@oakbrookpoloclub.com. Thank you in advance for your support and helping to preserve the club's history and importance in the global polo community. That was a great episode. We hope you had fun listening and learning about Oak Brook Polo Club's unique and storied history. If you enjoyed this episode, we encourage you to listen to others as we continue to celebrate this historic season. Thanks for stopping by, my friends, and hope to see you at Oak Brook this summer.